Hello, Econ students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 5, Section 3, Cost, Revenue, and Profit Maximization. So here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these terms that you see here. And as we go through the reading, you just need to put in the items that you need. So one of the things that we previously talked about was this production cost and revenue analysis that you see here. This whole idea that as far as being productive, um, you can hire a certain number of people up to a certain extent. Typically, you get into like stage 2, and what ends up happening is you have to start looking at issues that determine like your total cost and marginal cost to see whether or not you're actually continuing being productive. And certainly we're going to kind of come back and probably talk a little bit about that when we mention our terminology here. When we talk about measures of cost, cost is divided into several categories. There's fixed costs. These are the costs that an organization incurs even if there's no activities. So the total of these unchanging costs, or sometimes known as overhead, remains the same. Overhead could be issues that you're always going to have expenses for. So that could be if you're buying a property, that could be like a mortgage that you have to always pay every month, or it could be your insurance costs that you have to pay maybe a couple times a year or monthly, depending. Um, so that's an example of a fixed cost, your electricity, your utilities in general. On the other hand, expenses that change, such as one associated with labor and raw materials, these kind of costs are known as variable cost. And they always determine what's happening with the market. So if there is a high demand for labor, typically the price for labor is going to go up. So the sum of these two costs is what we know as total cost. Another category of cost is what we call marginal costs. These are the extra costs that incurred when a business produces one additional unit of a product. So if a business is, if it's taking more to produce whatever the product is, that would be basically what we're talking about with these marginal costs. So applying cost principles, entrepreneur engaged in e-commerce or electronic business, or the exchange of business that is conducted over the internet, uh, is an example of basically e-commerce. Um, Normally, you would have a very low fixed cost or overhead because of the fact that you're not having to have a special building or facility like a storefront to operate it out of. You could actually operate out of your own home or your garage or such. When a business analyzes its cost, it can find a level of production where it operates just enough with just enough revenue to cover its total operating costs. This is known as the break-even point. And obviously, we want to be ahead of that point so that we can be making a profit. If a business is operating basically underneath that break even point, obviously they're losing money. And sometimes they may do things like if they had a storefront, they might close the storefront, the same expenses, and again, operate out of a home or online as a way to kind of save money to break even. Marginal analysis and profit maximization. Businesses use two key measures of revenue to find the amount of output that produces the greatest profit. It would be total revenue. That's all the revenue that a business receives. Even more important is what we would call marginal revenue, which is the extra revenue associated with the production and sale of one additional unit of output. And it's that number, if you would go back to that chart that we were looking at earlier, that we would determine like where our labor should be and whether or not we should hire or not hire or such. Economists use marginal analysis, which is a type of decision making that compares the extra benefit to the extra cost of taking an action. Businesses want to know how to generate maximum profit. And they can do this by comparing extra expenses or those marginal expenses the extra benefits, or also known as the marginal revenue, and the profit maximizing quantity of the output is reached when the benefit and the cost are equal. Okay. And if we can make that happen, then, we're doing good. All right. Thank you so much.